Hello, everybody. This is Serpent, and welcome back to another episode on, I guess YouTube. Not on Minecraft or in iCraft or any of that stuff. No, this is welcome back to another episode in Eclipse. uh, Interesting. So I just thought I'd share with all of you what I've been doing lately, which is trying to learn how to make Minecraft mods. And I've actually been doing this for quite a long time. I've been trying to figure out how to make Minecraft mods for quite a long time, and I haven't had that much luck. However, that was before I realized that I had to actually put some work in and learn what Java learn how to program in Java. In other words, I was trying to be lazy about it, and that was a bad idea. uh, so I've learned Java, or the basics up to sort of advanced. Not mod advanced yet. That's for a little later. But I have been working on stuff, so I just thought I'd show you what I've been doing. This is a program where you have a little character which you move around. The character is an O, and the ground is this. So let's just run this program, and I'll show you what it does. So you have your little character right here, and whenever you input a D, an A, or a W, or an S, it will react accordingly. So you can input a D, and he will move one to the right, and you can do that pretty fast. And you can do up as well, and he has a little bit of gravity as well, so he'll fall down on his own. Or if you want to go faster, then you can click S and he'll fall faster. So not too complicated or anything. The printing mechanism is kind of cool, because this is in a console window. Remember, you can't just have him be printed on a certain X position or Y position. You have to actually figure out how to print him a certain number from the top as opposed to the bottom. Makes things kind of interesting. So I'll show you the print system first. Basically, it takes the Y position and turns it, instead of a Y position up from the ground, it turns it into a Y position down from the top, because it's printing from top to bottom. And then it will print that. And on each of the levels, it will also print the number of spaces he is from the left of the screen. And then once both those loops have finished, it will print the character, the O, and that'll get him in the right position. Then it'll print the distance from him down to the ground, and then it'll print the ground. So that's a kind of neat way of going about it. And then this just tweaks the X position and Y position variables, mostly, because I've had it take variables instead of solid numbers. That's why you can move them around. And it tweaks them whenever the input, which is a keyboard scanner, equals whatever input. Oh yeah, whoops. This is right here. I had a bit of a trouble with the if statements. It was ignoring the if statement, basically, and just doing whatever was in both if statements. And after 40-50 minutes of struggling, just pushing on through the confusion and blunder, I figured out that I had semicolons after the if statements. That was after I'd scoured the internet. That was kind of funny. Anyway, that's why that's why I ended up doing these two a different way from these two, because I did them slightly more complicated than was necessary, and then I did these two after I'd figured it out. So I ended up doing these more simply. But yeah, this just increase, or sorry, creates, don't know what increases has to do with anything. It just creates a scanner for input, No, it doesn't. It creates a scanner keys, which is system.in, and then the input variable eventually gets set to the scanner. And you can also, I just remembered, because we're still running the program, you can also type stop to stop the program, to terminate it. Now my next endeavor was to create tic-tac-toe, ideally with a computer opponent, and I haven't actually I haven't actually finished this yet. I moved on to other things, but it's still kind of neat, just the printing of the board. So basically it just prints the board. That's all it does so far. See? However, that is done with a cool sort of a pretty cool system, because I don't know how to do 3D arrays or 2D arrays. An array is just a bunch of values, by the way. And so what I've done is I've made an array which holds int variables, integers, and it's called positions, and it's got 9 slots, just like the number of slots on this board. So the public method draw is it takes that one-dimensional string of numbers and it will turn them into a board like this. So it will this is the fancy part. It takes an X position and a Y position and turns that into a corresponding position in the positions array, and that's done with this neat little expression. Yeah, it's done with that neat little expression, and that will be set to equal player. Now player is either X or O, so this will place X or O in the corresponding position. Then over here, the draw method, which extends down fairly far over to here, right above this one, it will take those X positions and Y positions, or, well, it won't take the X position and Y position directly, but it will take the positions array, and it will use the same sort of logic contained in this expression, and it will print out the board like that. And whenever it encounters a space between these characters, or rather it doesn't print the characters and then the spaces, it prints the spaces with the characters in between. So whenever it prints one of these characters, that character corresponds to a position in the positions array. So that means that this will be whatever was in that position of the positions array, and that will be whatever was set into it via the player variable. And if you remember, the player variable will either be X or O. So it also determines whether or not it needs to place one of these symbols, or these symbols, by using if statements. It will detect whether or not it's reached an end of a line or an end of a column down here, and it won't place one if it's at the end or at the end of or at the bottom. So it's just sort of nifty logic, basically. So my last, for the moment, program that I'll be showing you is this one called Can You Hear the Keystrokes Blowing? And it also contains ear and call ear. So I feel I should explain myself with these very odd names, because otherwise I'm likely to seem a tad insane. These were both puns that never got carried through to the program, so they are irrelevant puns, and that does not generally produce something that is very intelligible. So I should probably change those, but I will not, because I'm just too lazy. So now let's move on to the actual program. So this thing is pretty simple in the main function, or main method, sorry. All it does is create a static variable of type creative game and call it game tab, and then it sets game tab to a new creative game, or a new, and then calls the creative game constructor. So what that does is it will run the creative game constructor, essentially. That's the important bit, at least. And when that happens, it comes up with this. See, it's a window. I'm all proud of it. It's very good looking and shiny. So basically, this game, it's a very creative guessing game, as indicated by the title I can't highlight. And I have now closed stuff. Well, now that I've had to edit something out because I closed some things and therefore revealed some information I'd rather not, I will continue with the explanation. So it's a creative guessing game, as in it's a guessing game that's very creative. You guess the number from 1 to 10. So when you input a number, 1, and click Make Guess, it adds 1 to guesses made and updates the label tag, or the label, not the label tag. And then when I eventually get it right, also notice that my cursor is going back here. That's important. When I eventually get it right, it comes up with this tab. Oh, it's hard to move these. They're very small. It comes up with this tab. You won after 9 guesses. Your guesses were, and then the guesses. And then you can click play again, and it will reset your guesses and put your tab back in here. And also when you when you put in another guess, it will not be the same number as it was before. That's an important thing. Also, when you win, this goes all gray and clammy. Okay, so right, sorry, I forgot. That's only about half the coolness. Whoops, whoops, whoops. Not going well. Okay, that's only about half the coolness. So if you put in a non-number and then put that as your guess, it will not crash. Your guess, crash please, is not a valid number. For more information on numbers, visit the following website. And similarly, if you put a number that's not between 1 and 10, say -43, your guess, -43, is not between 1 and 10. For more information on simple arithmetic, visit the following website. So, the only way to crash this, I've found, and, well, is it a crash? I don't know. If you put in a big enough number, the int will not be able to hold it. So, oh, never mind. Works fine. Apparently that exception is caught. I knew there was something wrong with it, but apparently there isn't. Okay, so the creative game frame, this is the main one with the guess button and all that, is a lot of code. Well, I mean, it's not that much, but it's a fair hunk for my experience level. So this one is actually pretty well commented. So like it says up here, you import stuff, and then it creates an array list of type string and calls it nums, and then calls the constructor for an array list to create it. Then it also creates some more variables, num guesses, which is the number of guesses you've made, and random, which is the random number that you're trying to guess. Then it declares a whole bunch of objects. They're all of type J. Well, not really, but they all start with J, and that's because they're all part of J-frame, of the J-frame system. I think it's .swing, javax.swing. But they aren't the same things. This is a button, that's a label, which is just some text. That's a text field, which you can put stuff in, put words in, and then some more labels. And they're all turned into writing, or they've all got names. Oh yeah, it also sets the size of the text field. It's going to be 8 columns, 8 characters long, so that's kind of important. Otherwise you get well, it might default to something, but if you put in 1, it's going to be a pretty tiny text field. So this is the actual constructor of creative game, which is called by the main method. And when you call this constructor, it will basically form the frame, and that uses this code here, which basically just adds a bunch of buttons, or okay, it sets what happens when you click X. Funnily enough, you can put do nothing here, so good thing more programs don't do that. So you set what it does when you click close. You set the layout you're going to do. This is number of this is number of rows, this is number of columns, this is distance between rows, this is distance between columns in pixels. And then it adds a bunch of labels. This puts our previous labels that we defined and text fields and buttons that we previously defined onto the frame that we're making. Otherwise, it would just be blank because we're doing nothing with the objects we've created otherwise. And after it adds all that stuff in order, it will fill up this frame in order, by the way, which is why we need blank spaces in order to format it properly. If we don't put these in, it won't format properly. It'll look weird. For example, if we, let's see, label 2 and 2 the second, if we comment these out, we might end up getting some errors somewhere. I don't know. No, good. So see, it looks odd because it's got the text field in the upper right hand corner, the guess button down there. It looks all wonky. But if we get rid of these again, then, or if we get those back into working again, it will be formatted properly. Because right here is a space, and right here is a space, and they're filling up the grid that is filled from left to right, top to bottom. Okay, so from here, it sets the title to Creative Guessing Game. Then it sets the button, or it calls the add action listener method for button. And button is our button. It's the button that says guess or make guess. And when you call the add action listener to and then give it the parameter of this, it will put an action listener onto Creative Game, and it will link that to the button. And down here, where is it? Come on, where is it? Can't find it. Okay, somewhere down there. Oh, here. Right here is where the button, the button function, the function that the button has is declared. They're all called methods in Java. Functions are called methods in Java, but you know I've been using function all my life, so cut me some slack. So after you add that function to the button, that method to the button, you set the name to oh, I think this is wrong, right? I don't know. I don't know if that actually does anything. Sets the name of the component. Okay, it might. Hold on. Creative. No, it says creative guessing game, not creative guessing game. Oh, wonder. I don't know. This one might not do anything. Okay, then it packs all those components into a correctly sized frame, and then it makes it visible. After that, there's another method, which is enable objects, and then you feed it a boolean which. A boolean is a true or false value, and we're calling that which. So that will call the method setEnabled for button label field and label 3, and then it will give that which into the parameters requested, and that will allow me to easily set whether or not these things are actually enabled, which is whether or not they're gray and clammy. And even though I say that the method is enable objects, you can also disable objects with this. That's why the variable is here, not just true. So that's just a convenience thing for use later in the programming. Then after that is another one. This updates the random number. Then there is the action performed, action event E. Sorry, I had to breathe. I'm getting out of breath because I'm talking too quickly. So action performed, action event E is what we're... Okay, so it's a little complicated. This override means something. I'll get to that in a moment. But up here, you can see that the class creative game both extends JFrame, which is the frame making thing, and it implements action listener. So action listener is what listens to your it's what listens for button clicks and mouse clicks. Well, not mouse clicks. That's item listener, but that's a whole different tin of cake. So over here, action performed is a method inside action event, or it's a method inside action listener, sorry. And then you give it these parameters, action event and E. E will hold onto information about what's clicked, I think. I don't use it here, which is why I'm not sure. And then action event, I'm not so sure about that either. Yeah, I don't know, but those are parameters that are necessary. See, if I get rid of it, the compiler gets angry at me. Therefore, they're necessary and have a useful function. Okay. So anyway, when you hit the button, that's what this says. You first set the string variable text to field.getText. So the field is what I called the text field from earlier, and the getText method of field gets the text from the field. And then that's put into text. Then you add text to the nums array list, which, if you remember from earlier, is this. It's a big list of strings. See, strings. And we'll get to that a little later, but basically we're adding all our guesses into that. So, where did I'm lost. Oh, here, okay. So, from there, number of guesses is incremented upwards, and then this is a try-catch statement. So that basically allows me to handle exceptions with it. So we'll get to that in a moment. But anyway, in this try-catch statement, int guess, that's the number of guesses, is set to equal the no, it's not the number of guesses, it's just it's what our guess is, and it is set to what our guess is. This integer.parse thing is necessary because we're not actually inputting an integer into the text field, we're inputting a string, so we need to use the integer.parse to turn the string into an int. But that can throw an exception, which we'll get to in a moment. So then that tests whether guess is equal to the random number that you're trying to guess. If it is, then it makes everything be happy and display right answers stuff, and the new play again that calls the constructor for the play again frame, which is here. Then otherwise, if the guess is less than 11 and so if it's less than 11 and greater than 0, then it's wrong, but it's not going to open up any of those other frames. And otherwise, if it's wrong and not within 1 and 10, it will throw a new number out of range exception, which is defined here. So when that happens, it will be caught by this. The number of out of range exception will be caught here. That's why we need a try-catch block. And then the number out of range exception will trigger this, and that will enable all the objects false. So this is calling the enable objects method and giving which false. So that turns all the objects off from the main frame, and it will provide some very useful information. Then you can go back by clicking the button, which is defined in base frame. We'll get to that in a minute. A lot of talking. Okay, so from there, what happens? Well, it can also end up throwing a number format exception. This is not done by me, though. This is not manual. This is what happens when integer.parseInt tries to parse a non-int. and then it throws this number format exception, and then that displays not a valid number and a bunch of useful information. So I think we've covered the Creative Game tab. So let's move on to base frame. So base frame is what I've used to form the frame here, as well as the frame here. So I've reused the code in order to make two similar frames. So what I've done is created this method which will take in parameters and then put that on a frame. I can't do that with the Creative Game frame because it's got a lot of stuff that needs fanciness, and same goes for the Play Again frame. But for those other two, it's just simple display text and labels and then add a button that does the same thing for both. So that's why I can use this. And once again, we have a button do on thing, and that will re-enable the stuff, because if you remember, we're disabling all the buttons and text on this main frame when we open this other one. But when we click this button here, it will re-enable the stuff. So that's useful. Then it will dispose of the frame, which is a lot like exit on close, except dispose on close and exit on close are not the same thing. Exit on close will just destroy the whole program, terminate the whole program, which is what we want when we're closing the main frame. But on these side frames, we do just want them to close themselves. Although, to be fair, the text on the Creative Game frame is still not going to be enabled when you close the thing. So you know, it's a sort of amounts to the same thing. So you can't really do anything with this. Anyway, yeah, that's the base frame, and that's the base frame class, which corresponds to those two other ones, the not a valid number and not within range. So that just leaves us with Play Again, and then of course the main method, which does very little. And what this will actually, I think I've already done this one. Yeah, all this does is call the constructor for Creative Game, which does all the rest. So from here, Play Again, what this does is, once again, it creates a bunch of J objects, and then when you call its constructor, which we do eventually do in Creative Game when you've just won, it will basically form the frame. But this is the cool bit. This is where nums comes into play. So all that preparation we've done, putting all our guesses into nums, now that actually happens to do something. So what we do is we create a new JLabel and call it labelVar, and then we call the constructor for JLabel and input numbers. However, if you see up here, it's a for statement, not just a junky old normal statement, which I don't think exists. It's not an if statement, it's a loop. So what that does is it iterates through creativegame.nums, which is nums, but you have to reference it via Creative Game. So it will iterate through nums, and each time it does so, it will put the next value of nums into numbers, and until that number is not a string, or until it doesn't exist anymore, it will go through this, and that means that it will create this label, and it will put numbers into the text slot of the label, and then it will add the label. Then it'll go back up and do the same thing for the next value. So what that's doing is, if we make a large quantity of bad guesses, all of these are being put into nums, regardless of how stupid or wrong they are. See, if we put this in, it will still be put into nums because it's a string. That's why we need to That's why we need to have all that stuff taking strings and turning them into ints, and then just using the strings and putting them into nums, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to get that stuff. So now when I actually do get the right answer, see, all my guesses are displayed here, and that's due to the for loop here. And that's pretty cool, actually. So after we do that, we add the button, which takes us back to the main thing, and then we pack it, in other words, put an actual frame around it, and then set it to visible. So over here, this is the button, on button do, basically, and this will update the random number, reset the number of guesses, reset the label, which is the number of guesses label. We don't want it to display the previous number of guesses until you make a new one. This resets it early. And then it will also reset the text in our text field that you type stuff in, so that it doesn't display your previous guess. And it will re-enable the objects in the game tab using that nice method we created earlier. And it will reset the stored guesses, and then it will also get rid of the play again frame. Right here, collier.gametab.enable objects true. See this? You might think that we'd reference stuff in the creative game tab via creative game. However, that's not the case, because if you see over here, we are creating the game tab of type creative game, in the collier function. So the variable is stored in collier, or that's where its hierarchy resides, not in creative game. So that's why we're doing collier.gametab.field.setText and .label.setText, etc. instead of creative game.label.setText. This numGuesses variable is a static variable, which is a variable that's the same for all numbers of these classes. See, what we can do here is we can say over here, hello, and that creates another instance of creative game. Well, it doesn't quite yet, but now if we do that, when we run this, we will get 2 frames. See, so those are both instances of creative game, which is why we need to declare some variables to be static, and which is also why you don't reference stuff that is inside the constructor of an object via the class that the constructor resides in. So I think that's about all. I'm also starting to work on making the mod, because I think I have enough knowledge to be able to get through the Forge tutorial stuff. At least I'm hoping so. Oh yeah, that's just it whining. Look, the static field creative game.numGuesses should be accessed in a static way, but it doesn't provide an error, so it doesn't matter. Therefore I ignore it. It's probably right in general, but it doesn't matter here. So yeah, I'm working on a mod, but it's not going to be anything interesting, nor is it going to be complicated, nor is it finished, nor is it started, basically. But I am starting work on that, so hopefully I shall actually manage to learn that stuff. I don't know why I highlighted that. So, I'm excited about that, because I've always wanted to be able to do that. It sounds really interesting to me, and I've got some ideas I want to play around with. So I'm hoping that will go well. But in any case, that's about all the time I have for today. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Waving. I'm not, but I'm waving.